who you are, where you come from, what you believe, you can't escape it. Every human relationship has it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But sometimes it is good to have this thing. You guys know conflict, it can be a big deal. It could be a little deal. You know, you get into stupid arguments, you get into really serious, big arguments. The Bible, if you guys have read most of it, is filled with stories about conflict. And there's a spectrum of basically how you can handle that. Some ways you handle conflict, honor God. And some ways, just frankly, don't at all honor God. Some ways are loving towards other people. Some ways are not loving towards people. And so we all have a way with dealing with conflict. If your way of dealing with conflict is not, that's a way of dealing with conflict. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But yeah, we all have a way of dealing with it, better for worse. And the chances are pretty much any human relationship we have, whether it's or interaction, it's in person, it could be a text message, it could be online, it could be over the phone, that conflict comes up. And so we're going to be talking about that for the next about 5 weeks. And how do we deal with that as Christians? And so conflict, it's unavoidable in all your human relationships. It happens, Christians, non-Christians, no matter where you're at, it's part of life. It's inevitable. You will, without a doubt, face conflict. Jesus was even perfect, and he faced conflict. You're probably already thinking, think about all the relationships you have conflict. You got conflict between your siblings. If you have brothers or sisters, conflicts between husband and wife, conflicts between you and your parents, conflicts between your teachers and you guys, conflicts between your friends happens a lot, conflict between your boss and you happens, conflict with me and other church leaders, it happens, there's conflict. Conflict with your teammates. If you're on a sports team or you get assigned for a team or something, even if you're on worship team, there can be conflicts. Even teams at church. Conflicts between your neighbors. I'm sure you guys have all heard of that, where people hate their neighbors or have some sort of conflicts with them, the people they live next to. So it really is inescapable that everyone is going to have conflict. And so the question I want you guys to reflect on is, what if, as Christians, we viewed conflict as a way to demonstrate respect, reverence, glory for God, and win benefits for people involved, meaning to love them by benefiting everyone involved. If conflict is unavoidable, the question is, how can we handle conflict in a way that honors God and truly loves other people? And so to answer that, we're going to really have 2 key theme verses throughout these series, and I want you guys to know what they are. And they're really simple. I would encourage you to memorize them and know them. They have 8 words. So, Matthew 5:9, this is what Jesus says. He says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be sons of God." And it's one of those things that's inserted in there with all this other stuff, and we just kind of pass by it oh, big deal. But you're going to see it's a big deal. And there's a lot in that statement that Jesus made. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be sons of God. And in addition to that, in Romans 12:18, Paul told the Romans, the Christians, this. He says, this is how you should live your life. He says, if possible, so far as it depends on you, meaning it's your responsibility, whether you're the one who started the conflict, whether you're the one who's handling the conflict well or handling it bad, it is your responsibility if you consider yourself a Christian. He says, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all, meaning live at peace with everyone in your life so far as it depends on you. That means you do everything in your power to make a relationship peaceful, to make a relationship pleasant. And we're going to, like I said, continue to unpack those over the week. So another question is, why is it important to handle this biblically? And I want to give you guys a few reasons. Obvious church answer, it honors God. It really does. It honors God. If you consider yourself a Christian and your life is about honoring God, loving God, glorifying God, this honors God. Another thing is it magnifies the gospel, the good news of Jesus. It says this in Colossians 1:19 through 20. For in him, it's talking about Jesus, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him, through Jesus, to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. One of the things that Jesus came to do with his life and his death, besides just saving you, was actually just that, to make peace in relationships, to make peace even with all creation, which is basically under sin because of what humanity did. But it's describing, Paul says, there's going to come a time where Jesus is going to reconcile. He's going to bring everything back to what it should have been, and there will be peace everywhere, in nature, in human relationships, when we're with God, everywhere. And so it magnifies the gospel. Oh, I totally forgot. David, can you grab the things in the back? The handouts, and there should be some pens, and if not, in the back corner there, but thanks. Another thing is it protects the reputation and witness as Christians. Number one complaint about Christians: hypocrites. You guys don't even do what you are asking other people to do. You don't do it. And so when we're peacemakers, it protects our witness as Christians. Even in the Bible, it says, especially for, I'm just thinking of this off the top of my head, for pastors, one of the qualifications for being a pastor, for being an elder in the church, Paul says, is they must be well-liked by outsiders. That's kind of a weird thing. Like, okay, so non-Christians have to, or at least well-respected, by non-Christians. And you're like, that's a weird thing because they're leading the church. And the reason that Paul has that is because there's a mentality kind of in our culture, and you guys have maybe even said this before. Well, I don't really care what other people think because their opinion doesn't really matter. And in one sense, even in the Bible, that's true. There's only one person who really opinion matters ultimately. It's God's. You're not going to stand before your friends someday. You're not going to stand before your parents someday. You're not going to stand before your teachers one day. Your life is accountable to God, and really God only, in a very supreme sense. But in another way, God does care what other people think about you, because if you claim the name of being a Christian, then you basically say, I am associated with Jesus. I know Jesus. I am like what Jesus is like. And so what you do, whether it's a good reflection or bad, is what people will think about Jesus, is what people will think about your God. So it's important because it protects our witness. And let me tell you, when Christians are fighting and they're not treating each other the way that Christ treated them, it will overshadow, meaning it will block out whatever you have to tell anyone about Jesus. No one wants to listen to some person talking about Jesus when they're constantly fighting with other Christians and they just make fun of each other and hate each other and they're not forgiving one another and loving one another. No one wants to listen to you. So, it protects our reputation, our witness as a Christian. It protects us from sinning during conflict when we handle it biblically. Just because there's conflict doesn't mean someone's sin. I'll actually teach you guys later. Most conflict just comes from preferences. It's not even right or wrong. It's just, I prefer this thing and this person prefers this thing. They prefer to do it that way and I prefer to do it this way. And there's nothing necessarily wrong in that. It's the way that you handle it and where your heart is. It brings maximum benefit for those involved, meaning if you actually want to have relationships that are good and that you benefit from it and they benefit from it, handling it biblically will help with that. And lastly, it just leads to meaningful relationships. I can't promise you after teaching you guys stuff that every relationship you have will be awesome, but if you want like legit friendships, the types of friendships that like touch your soul and that are satisfying and that you enjoy the rest of your life, like even if you separate from that friend for a time or you're not always together, this is the type of thing you should work through. This is the type of truth that you work on, to have those types of relationships and friendships. And even one day when you guys want to be married or you want to have a really good relationship at work with your employer or whoever, These are the types of things you want to do, and they're all biblical. And then just generally, it'll lead to a life of peace. I don't know if you've ever met anyone who's constantly handling conflict poorly, but you could tell, even in themselves, even if they think they're right, there's just a constant, generally, there's just a constant unrest. They're always mad about something. They're always feeling like they have to get over somebody. They always have to win out in some way. And so those are a bunch of reasons why we should do this biblically. So all we're going to talk about today is really there's 3 ways to handle conflict. Just 3. And I mean, they're categories, but there's 3 ways you can handle it. The first way is peace faking. And I think I have a slide up here. So let me see if I can get there. Come on. There we go. The first way is peace faking. And we'll talk about what each of these mean. The second way is peace breaking. And the third one is peacemaking, what Jesus describes. So peace faking, peace breaking, and peacemaking. So 3 P's, really easy to remember. But before we do that, I want to define a couple terms before I just start throwing them around. So there's 2 things I want to tell you about. We're constantly telling you about church to glorify God, to give glory to God. But the question is, what does that actually mean, to glorify God? This is what it means. Glory is a biblical word for the essence of God, and I think I wrote it on your guys' things. But to glorify God means you bring attention to, you display, and you reveal His perfection. You take your life and you point to how great God is. His wisdom, His power, His compassion, His love. To glorify God, it's like you take any opportunity to show God off. Like, look how awesome God is. So I'll give you guys an illustration of that. If I really love you, I've probably brought you to this place. But I still love you anyway. I just can't bring you all there. This is my favorite place to eat in the world. And if you like steak of any kind, this is the place you should go. But I'm giving you this illustration because this is something I love. I think this place is great. They slice little steaks in little thin pieces, and you cook it yourself right there in like 30 seconds, and then you proceed to put that steak in your mouth for the most delicious thing that has ever been in there. The closest one's in Tustin. It's only like 20 minutes away. Anyway, it is super good. Gyukaku Japanese barbecue is amazing. I love this place. And anyone can ask you, I'm like a disciple for this place. Meaning I'm like, you have never eaten there? Let's go. I'm like, I will pay for your first meal here because I am confident. I brought road heavers there before. I brought my friends there before. And I have yet to meet a person who's like, this isn't that good. Everyone's like, dang, this is pretty good, if not amazing. So I love this place. And so what I'm describing, when we say glorify God, it's kind of like the same type of thing. Imagine God was like this restaurant. He's amazing. He's incredible. We love it. And we enjoy Him. And then when we go out in the world, we're trying to point people like, you got to come see this. This is awesome. This is the coolest thing in the universe. And God is way better than some silly restaurant. And so when we say glorify God, that's what we're talking about, this showcasing. And we all showcase, we all worship something. We all point people to something. It might be yourself, it might be a sport, it might be a video game you like, but there's something you think is awesome, and you're like, oh, everyone has got to see this. And the ironic thing is, even as a Christian or even as a non-Christian, if you don't choose to glorify God in this way, meaning you're not making disciples, you're not bringing people in to seeing this, it doesn't change the glory of God. It really doesn't change it at all. And so, does anyone know what car this is?
An expensive one.
An expensive one. You guys can tell it's fancy. This is an Acura NSX, the new model, the 2019. Beautiful, beautiful, amazing car. It's very fast. It's historically like an amazing, amazing sports car. But now think about if I just kept this sports car in the garage with a cover over it, and let's say I had one and I never showed you guys. it doesn't change the fact that that sports car is still amazing. All it changes is I am keeping people from missing out on it. I'm not letting you guys drive it. I'm not letting you touch it. I'm not letting you see it. It's just sitting there in the garage. And, we're not going to break God like we break a car or something. But the point is, it doesn't change the glory. And so when we talk about glorifying God, we're not talking about adding anything to God that he's not already. We're talking about making known what he already is. And even when we choose not to do that, all we're doing is basically telling all the non-Christians is, I'm just going to let you miss out on the most awesome person in the universe. That's what we're telling them when we don't want to tell them about God, or we don't want to glorify God through conflict. So that's what it means to glorify God. And another one is conflict. I want to define what that is because we're going to be talking about it for a lot. So I want to have a definition. And this is all it is. A difference in opinion or purpose that frustrates your goals or desires or someone else's. A difference in opinion or purpose that frustrates your goals or desires or someone else's. And notice, in that definition, again, it could be good and it could be bad. It doesn't necessarily mean just because there's conflict, there is sin going on. And so conflict happens anytime you're at odds over what you think, what you want to do, or what you want. Whatever your desire is, whatever you do, or what you think. Like I said, conflict isn't always bad. And let me even give you guys a biblical example. In the Bible, in Acts 15, Barnabas and Paul are homies. They're like this, like the whole time. They're going around the world traveling, preaching the gospel together. And then they want to go on another trip, but there's a problem. Barnabas wants to bring good old Mark. And Paul's like, we ain't bringing Mark. Last time we brought him, he ditched us. So I don't want to bring Mark. You got to read a little bit in between the lines here. But that's basically the conversation that probably happened between Paul and Barnabas. And Barnabas is like, no, we're bringing him. And then Paul's like, well, you guys go do your thing, and you can take Mark, and I'm going to go do my own thing. And it says, the Bible describes it as they had a sharp disagreement. So here you have an apostle and this guy who's been preaching the gospel, and both great guys, they had a disagreement. But the awesome thing is, because they split up, they're able to preach to more people. And so Barnabas and Mark go and preach to a bunch of people, and Paul goes and preach to a bunch of people. And basically more people hear about Jesus because they disagreed, because they agreed to split up. And so good things can come from conflict. And like I said before, many conflicts, they're not just about right or wrong, it's your preference. It was Paul's preference not to bring Mark. It was Barnabas' preference to bring Mark. And so it's usually, conflict comes down to what to do, how to do something, or when to do something. It's pretty rare where it's just right or wrong. So what are the ways we can handle conflict? We talked about those three. Let's talk about what peace faking is. Let's talk about peace faking. Peace faking happens whenever people care more about escaping conflict than they do about the relationship. They care more about getting away from that conflict and not being bogged down than they care about you or the relationship that they have with you. And just like the name you can imagine, peace faking is when we call people a faker. They're faking it. They're not really trying to make peace. It has the illusion of peace, but it's not really. And you guys know this. Have you guys ever met someone who's just like ridiculously calm all the time, or just so agreeable and so sweet all the time? And there are some people who are this genuinely. They're just really sweet. But you just know there's something that's off. You're like, there's no way someone is this okay with everything all the time. And you suspect something is up. It might be that they're faking peace. They just don't want any conflict, and they won't touch anything. No conflict. And so they'll just say whatever other people want. They'll be sweet. They'll be nice. They don't want to touch conflict. And a lot of times, we should be engaging in certain kinds of conflict that are important. So, when does peace faking happen? I'm going to introduce you guys something called the slippery slope, and we're going to put this together a little bit like a puzzle piece. But peace faking. Peacemaking happens anytime one of these four things happen. And it's a scale. So I want you guys to imagine, and we're going to fill this out a bit later. It's going to be like a half circle. But it starts up here, and the further you go down, the faster it slides. So the worse it gets as it goes to the end. So it starts in the middle. So the first thing is it starts with denial. If someone's in denial that there's even a conflict, that's usually a sign of peace faking. They're just going to say, nope, I'm not dealing with that. There's not a problem. I'm fine. I'm going to fake it. The second one is blame. I'm going to blame someone else for the conflict. It's their fault this is going on. They need to deal with it. It's their problem. The next one is flight, and that is just withdrawing from the conflict. Basically, I'm not going to see that person. I'm going to avoid that person. I'm going to avoid the conflict because I don't want to deal with it. You can see a pattern here. Not wanting to deal with it. Peace faking. Or even when they see that person, they're going to deny that there's a problem. They're going to act like everything is okay. And really, the last one is suicide. Suicide is the ultimate peace-faking technique. And really what it is you're trying to escape some sort of conflict through terminating your own life. That's the goal. I don't want to deal with this conflict anymore, and if I end my life, I will never have to deal with it again. And that's the ultimate thing of peace-faking. And I would tell you guys, according to basically statistics now in the U.S., the third leading cause in deaf people your guys' age, anyone under 18, is suicide. Suicides are on the increase of people peace-faking. So I want to give you guys some biblical examples. So if you have your Bibles, pull them out. I want you guys to look some of these up. But I want to give you guys some examples of what this looks like in the Bible. Can I have someone do the first one, denial? Just raise your hand if you're going to do that one. Or I'll just start picking people. Isaac. Who can do blaming? Emily. Who can do flight? Rachel. And then Asher, why don't you do the last one, suicide. And you're going to see, like I said, all of these are throughout the Bible. I'm hoping through this series I'll get to share with you guys a bunch of stuff. You're like, I can't believe that's in the Bible. There's some weird stuff that happens in the Bible, especially through conflict. So who has denial? Isaac, can you read that one? 1 Samuel 2:22 through 25.
Now Eli was very old, and he kept hearing all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who were serving at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And he said to them, why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all these people. No, my sons, it is no good report that I hear the people of the Lord spreading abroad. If someone sins against a man, God will mediate for him. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to death.
Perfect. So, get this. Eli, he's a priest. He's got 2 sons. It's like the pastor's kids. And what they're doing around is sleeping with all the women at church and doing weird things. And Eli's like, you shouldn't be doing this. And he tells them that, but he really doesn't do anything about it. He doesn't discipline his sons. He gives them a good talking to. And they're like, yeah, whatever, Dad. I'm not going to listen to you. And so Eli ignores, he really denies the conflict and dealing with it with his worthless sons. And God eventually puts both of them to death. And Eli's whole even family line, he ends it. And they have no more sons because Eli ignores his sons. Next one is blaming. Who's got Exodus?
I think you put the wrong verse because there's only 21 and 22. There's no 23.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you guys the story then. So, in Exodus, there's a point where Moses goes up and he gets the 10 commandments from God. And it's gnarly. There's like fire and clouds like up on this mountain. And it's like, whoa, God's up there. And all the people, he's like, you wait down here. And if you touch this mountain, you will die. Don't touch the mountain. And they're like, okay. We won't touch the mountain. And then Moses is up there for like 40 days. And then people are there with Moses' brother-in-law, Aaron. And they're like, we don't even know what happened to that guy. For all we know, he's dead. And we're just sitting here waiting for somebody who's never going to come back. And they're like, hey, I got an idea. Let's build a golden cow and let's worship it as our new God because we don't know what happened to Moses. But then what happens is Aaron basically gives in to them. He builds this golden cow for them, and Moses comes back and he's like, what are you doing? I literally just got the 10 commandments from God, and you're already down here, and God's about to smite you for what you did. God actually told Moses to go down. He's like, go down there. Those people are actually already worshiping another God while I'm talking to you. Like, really? Did that just happen? And then Aaron, basically, when he comes down, he's like, what? Moses is all mad. He's like, well, they were mad at me, and, they gave me a bunch of gold. And then this cow appeared, this golden cow. And so he blames basically the people, even though Aaron is the one who made this golden cow for them. And he blames the other people. Who's got Jonah? We'll go ahead and read that, the first 4 verses.
Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it. For their evil has come up before me. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish in the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so the ship threatened to break up.
Perfect. So Jonah, perfect example of fleeing from conflict. God appears to him, and he says, go up to the city Joppa. And you know what Jonah does? He's like, see ya. And you know what's funny? When you read Jonah, sometimes, look at this. When you read those first verses of Jonah, the writer, which is probably Jonah, it's sort of like a confessional from him, he actually talks about how he just keeps going down and down. God tells him go up to Joppa. He goes down to Tarshish, down to the port, down to the ship, down into the bottom of the ship. And the point he's trying to say is, I was running as far possibly away as I could from God because of this conflict. And he reveals what that is later. He doesn't want the Ninevites to receive mercy from God. Those are people who were torturing his people, who had killed his people. And he's like, yeah, right, God, I'm not going to preach to them because I know if I go, you'll forgive them. And I don't want that. I want those people to suffer and die for what they have done. So flight, and then the last one is suicide. Who has 1 Samuel 31:4? Go ahead.
Then Saul said to his armor bearer, draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and mistreat me. But his armor bearer would not, for he feared greatly. Therefore Saul took his own sword and fell upon it.
Perfect. So Saul, the king of Israel, he committed suicide. He's basically in a battle. He gets wounded. He doesn't want to get killed by basically losing to the other side, and he tells the guy who carries his armor around me, I want you to kill me. And the guy's like, I'm not killing you, dude. You're the king. If I stab you, people gonna kill me. So I'm not doing that. And then Paul's like, fine, I'll do it myself. And he kills himself. That's what happens. He falls, it says he falls on his own sword, and he commits suicide in that conflict. So, and there's numerous examples we can find in the Bible. But let me say this about peace faking. Peace faking leads to fake and shallow relationships. It leads to fake and shallow relationships, whether it's with God or with other people. Peace faking always leads to fake and shallow relationships. It may have the appearance of being genuine, but it's not. It's fake. Peace faking, it doesn't honor God, and it doesn't lead to loving others the way that God calls us to love them. The second way we can handle it is peace breaking. Peace breaking happens whenever people care more about winning a conflict, arguments, asserting their rights, getting what they want. They care more about those things than they care about the relationship, or they care about the other person. They just want to win. They just want to triumph. They just want to be like, yeah, I'm right and you're wrong. They care more about that. And so peace breaking happens anytime there's insults, there's gossip, there's fighting, or ultimately on the other side of that would be murder. That would be the ultimate form of peace breaking. And so let's walk through those. We got insults. You guys know what insults are. You use your words to attack someone in a conflict. Instead of attacking the problem, you attack the person. I hate you. I don't like you. You're stupid. You think The Last Jedi is a good movie. whatever it may be. You attack them. Another way is you, gossip. And basically what gossip is you try to destroy them with your words, but you try to do it with other people. You try to destroy their reputation or their credibility. You can't trust that person. You know what this person did? You know what they did to me? You know how they hurt me? Let me tell you about that. And so instead of dealing with the problem with them, you're just trying to take the conflict and basically turn it back on them by gossiping them. The next one is fighting. And really, that's any time you're just trying to force or intimidate someone into basically being scared to get what you want, to put them into submission to what you want. If you don't do this, I will hurt you. If you don't do this, this will happen. I will end this friendship. Manipulation is what happens under fighting. They try to manipulate you. And the last one is murder. Just like suicide, ending the life. And instead of ending your own life, you're ending someone else's life. If I kill you, then I won't have to deal with this conflict anymore because I don't even have to think about what you want or your preferences. And so that's the ultimate form. And remember, this is a sliding scale, so we're going to put in the middle piece here in a second. But the further you start going to the right or the further you start going to the left, the faster it goes. The speedier it goes, the closer you get to there. And that's why it's called the slippery slope. Let's look at some examples of that in the Bible. Who's got 1 Kings 18:27? Let's do someone new. How about Ryan? Find that one? 1 Kings 18:27. Gossip. Natalie. Can you do 3 John 9 through 10? Fighting. Nikki. You got a Bible underneath yours. Let's do John 18:10. And Chad, why don't you do 2 Samuel 3:27? You got it, Ryan? It's okay if you got to take a second to get it. 1 Kings 18-27. If you need Toby's help, Toby's with you. Help him out, Toby. Help him out.
I'm getting it.
Who's got, let's just start with gossip. Does Natalie have gossip? You want to read that one?
Actually, 300.
Okay, I have written something to the church, but
Diotrephes. I know, he's got a weird name. He's a weird dude.
who likes to put himself first does not acknowledge our authority. So if I come, I will bring up what he is doing, talking wicked nonsense against us, and not content with that, he will as the brothers, and also stops those who want to then put them out of the church.
Perfect. 3 John, shortest book in the Bible if you've never read it. But it's basically a letter of John saying, this guy, Diotrephes, John's sending missionaries over to the church, and this guy probably has a church that meets in his home, and he's basically like, well, you guys can stay outside. You ain't coming in here because I don't accept John as an apostle. I don't accept his teaching. So what he's doing is gossiping about John and the rest of his people and saying, yeah, we don't want to associate with them. And here's all these wicked things about them. Ryan, you got it? Yeah. Insults. 1 Kings 18:27.
And at noon Elijah mocked him, saying, Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing or he is relieving himself. For he is on a journey. Perhaps he is asleep and must be awake.
Perfect. So Elijah, he's a prophet. And basically all these people are worshiping this other called Baal, this other god called Baal. And what he does is he sets up this little test, and he says, you guys build a little altar, and I'll build an altar, and we'll put an animal on it. And you cry out to your God, and I'll cry out to my God. And whoever God sends fire from heaven and burns it up, that's the one who's really God. And they're like, okay. So then they're there, and they're worshiping their god Baal, and they're cutting themselves, and they're bleeding everywhere, and they're like, Baal, send fire, send fire. And of course nothing's happening because it's not a real God. And then Elijah mocks them, and he's like, maybe your God's sleeping. Maybe he's defecating in the restroom and he can't come to you right now. That's in the Bible. That's what it means when it says, maybe he's relieving himself. Maybe he's going to the bathroom and he can't come help you right now. And so he's mocking their God. Elijah doesn't want to have a relationship with those people, so he was willing to mock them. Basically, the story ends and they all get killed for what they are. So he was trying to end that relationship real quick through mocking. And that's what these things lead to. If you want to end a relationship, you just go on one of those sides of that scale. Who's got fighting? John 18:10. Nikki?
Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?"
Perfect. So Peter, when Jesus gets arrested, he chops off the ear of this guy who comes to arrest him, the servant of the high priest. That's called fighting. When someone comes to take your friend, and you're like, I'm going to handle this conflict. No more ear. Chop it off. That's what happens. And then the last one is murder. Who has 2 Samuel 3:27? Chat.
Now when Abner had returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him privately, and there stabbed him in the stomach so that he died for the blood of Asahel, his brother.
Perfect. So, you guys probably don't know this story, but it's actually a really cool one. If you want to read 1 Samuel. Basically, there's this guy, Abishai, and he's the brother, Ashael, the brother of Joab. And they're in this war against this other general, Abner. And Joab's brother is super fast at running. And so he's running after Abner. And Abner turns around and he's like, dude, go home. I'm going to have to kill you if you keep following me. But he's like, nah, I'm going to still try to follow you and kill you. So then he finally catches up Joab's brother, and Abner turns around and just stabs him with a spear. And he's done, dead. And Joab hears of it, that his brother got killed by Abner, and he is pissed that this happened. And then even later, Abner tells Joab, like, dude, I told him to turn around. I told him I was going to have to kill him, and he didn't listen. And Joab's like, oh, I don't really care. So basically what happens later is some politics happens, some good stuff happens, and Abner's kind of in good graces again with King David. And Joab is the general for King David. And Joab's like, oh, heck no, we're not just going to let this guy back in, David. So he does. He's like, oh, Abner, come over here. I got to tell you something. And he takes out his guts, and he kills him right there on the ground. He pulls him to the side. That's what happens. He's like, hey, how's it going? And he stabs him in the stomach and rips out his guts. And he's like, that's what you get for killing my brother. And that's why he kills him. So that's how Joab handles the conflicts. He spills the guts of this other guy, Abner, for killing his brother. So that's one way they handle it. Ironically, Joab gets killed later, and David's not very happy with him. Anyway, so peace faking, it always led to fake and shallow relationships. Peace breaking always leads to what the name is, broken and toxic relationships. That's what peace breaking leads to, broken and toxic relationship. And if you've ever handled a conflict in this way, you know that's what it leads to. Or you know, have someone in your life who handles conflict that way. That's what it leads. Your relationship is probably broken or toxic with them. Peace breaking, just like peace faking, it doesn't honor God, and it doesn't lead to loving others the same way. So the third way to handle conflict is through peacemaking. And peacemaking happens whenever people care more about glorifying God through conflict in a relationship than about escaping the conflict or winning the conflict. That's how peacemaking happens. And this is the final kind of piece of our slope here. And this is the red zone is where we want to be in as Christians. That's how we want to handle conflict. And the 4 ways you can handle conflict in there is overlooking it. You just say, look, it's not a big deal, and I'm going to forgive the person. And I have to say this about overlooking. Overlooking doesn't mean you say it's not a big deal and I forget, and then when you get in an argument with them later, you bring it up. That's not overlooking. Overlooking is what God does. We see it, we acknowledge it as an offense, but it's not a big deal. And we just say, look, I forgive the person. I don't even need to tell them about it. And I'm never, ever going to bring it up again. There's one exception to that, and we'll talk about it later in our series. But basically, when that person does the same thing as a pattern over and over again, it might be loving to tell them, hey, I love you, and this is something I see you doing repeatedly as a pattern in your life. And so I just want you to consider this or think about this. You may be sinning against people in this way. So overlooking it, just talking it out with someone, discussing it. You go to them and you talk to them about it. Matthew 18 is the way we talk to people about things. When somebody offends you or does something sinful towards you, you go to them alone in private first. That's the first thing you should do in any sort of conflict with someone else. You go to them in private first. Then Jesus says, if they have sinned, if they've really done something wrong and they won't listen to you, then you don't call up all your friends and gossip. You don't go like, oh, pray for this person because they won't turn from their sin. You say, hey, guys, I have this problem with this person. This is what it is. Will you come with me, listen to both of us, and then plead with this person to turn from whatever their sin is? And if they still won't listen, then you tell the church about it. And you say, hey, we love this person, and they're a Christian, but they won't turn from the sin that they're in. And you hope at that point that they turn from it. That's how you handle it talking with people. The other way is just getting help. And it's kind of what I just described. But you could just have someone come in. They don't have a bias. They don't love either of you particularly more. They don't even know much about the conflict. You just say, hey, can you just help us sort this out? Be like a middle person and be a mediator between us. And the next is accountability. Just taking personal responsibility and just owning it. Yes, I'm a part of this conflict. Yes, I was a jerk. Yes, I shouldn't have done this or that. Or, yes, I'm a part of this conflict, but this is how I feel, or this is my reasoning of why I want it done this way. And so you take accountability in the conflict. So we're going to conclude, but you guys need to know peacemaking is a choice that you guys have to make. Romans 12:18, it's up to you and your responsibility. Peace faking and peace breaking, it's always going to result in shattered relationships, shallow relationships. It's not going to go well. If you're a Christian, peace faking and peace breaking, frankly, it's not an option. It's your opportunity to be a peacemaker. That's why Jesus says peacemakers will be called sons and daughters of God. That will be your reputation. Someone who is godly if you seek to make peace in relationships. And you guys have to know this. If you're going to handle conflicts God's way, you have to know God. If you haven't trusted in Jesus, you can try this all you want, but it's not going to work because you don't even have peace with God. And so if you don't have peace with God through Christ, none of this will work because you and God are at odds. You're not even practicing the thing that you're trying to do with other people between you and the most amazing God of the universe. And so you have to know God and trust Him first. And to trust God, that means you look to Him for everything in every conflict. You want to follow His way. And you do exactly the opposite of maybe what you feel like doing. This culture tells you guys, do what you feel. You have the right to feel this way. You have the right to feel upset. You know what peacemaking looks like a lot of the times? Where you lay aside how you feel and you do what you know is right in God's eyes. And sometimes that's defeating to our own pride. I feel things. I don't want to act contrary to my feelings. But you have that choice. And you can make that choice. And so it's up to you guys. And like I said, sometimes it's doing the exact opposite of how you feel. Side note, some people are like, should I read the Bible if I don't feel like it? I'm like, yes! You should always read the Bible. Do you eat food even when you don't feel like it? If you haven't eaten for 5 days? Yeah, you're like, even if I don't want to eat this particular food, I'm going to die. It should be like the same way with the Bible. Like, if I don't read this Bible, even if I don't feel like it, my spiritual being is going to die. That's how it should feel. Or that's how you should think when you don't feel like reading the Bible. But yeah, so just know, peacemaking, it's an act of obedience to God. That's what peacemaking ultimately is. You know, learning the skills, I can't promise you what we'll do over the next 5 weeks, that you're going to have perfect relationships and there's never going to be conflict. But I can promise you guys, if you want a relationship with God that is awesome, and you want a relationship with other people that is enjoyable, that is peaceful, that is meaningful, that is deep beyond just talking about video games or clothes or other things going on, like a legit friendship, then I would encourage you guys, practice these things that we are going to learn. And so on the back of your sheets, we have the questions we're going to talk about on Wednesday. And I'm going to re-give these out, but start thinking about how you would answer those questions. Start thinking about how do you handle conflict on this scale most of the time. All of us, except for suicide and murder, have probably been on one piece of this spectrum at some point. And there's probably been a point where maybe some of us have been sad on us where we have contemplated suicide. And some of us who have been so angry that we have contemplated, I just want to choke this person out right now. I just hate them. That's why Jesus says, when you're angry in your heart, you're liable to judgment of even murder, because it's like in your head, you're fantasizing this idea of murder. So we've all been on that spectrum. But I just want you guys, challenge you guys to think about it, and we're going to talk about it Wednesday.